Okay, this is it, your complete guide to every tool you need to make gorgeous sourdough bread and to make the process fun and easy. A lot of you guys asked me for a full rundown of all the gear I use, so I'm going to share with you my whole sourdough workflow from start to finish so you can see how I use these tools in action. I'm going to make a couple of country loaves right now, and as I go through, I'll show you exactly why I recommend each and every tool. Of course, you can find links to all the gear in the description below and also to my course on how to make great sourdough bread. This is an easy, step-by-step guide that's helped thousands of you take your bread to the next level. Click the link and you'll get a free trial. Okay, lovely people, let's make some bread. So here I have my levain, which I made last night, and I have it in a 4-quart glass bowl. I love these bowls. Glass is key so that you can see the progress of your dough during bulk fermentation. I also love less mess, so I try to do as much as possible in the one bowl. I'm going to add my water, I'm going to dissolve the levain, and then I'm going to add my flour. But before I do that, I'm going to mix my 2 flours. So with my typical country loaf, I like to add 20 to 25% freshly milled whole grain to your standard white bread flour. I love King Arthur. I will show you my mill in just 1 second. But before that, I want to show you this, a dough whisk. Do you need it? Not necessarily. You can use your hand for all of these processes that I use this dough whisk, but I'll show you what advantage it brings to the table in a second. In fact, throughout this video, I'm going to give you options for every budget because you can make great sourdough without any fancy equipment, full stop. But if sourdough becomes a weekly or every other week practice for you, like it is for me, there are tools that make the process way more efficient and help you achieve the crumb and crust and ear that you want, such as the dough whisk. So this brought and tailored dough whisk is really well made. It can go in the dishwasher, but the one major advantage is cleanup. We all know that flour and water on your hand is like cement. It takes forever to scrape it off, but this thing is amazing. The dough will come off really cleanly, really easily. I am making 2 loaves in one dough. So this is 1,000 grams of flour to 650 grams of water. I have reserved 50 grams to add my salt, and that's a technique called bassonage. As you can see, this dough whisk makes quick work at dissolving my levain. And now we're going to add our flour. I'm gonna mix this all up together. Some of you might be wondering why I already have my levain in with my water and my flour instead of doing a conventional autolyse, which is just flour and water. Well, I do a technique called fermentalise, and if you want to know the advantages of that, I go through that in my course as well. All right, I'm just going to mix this up, and then I'm going to take another essential piece of equipment, bowl scraper. Every sourdough baker needs a bowl scraper. This is an extension of your hand. With a little bit of water nearby, wet your hand so the flour doesn't stick. Use your bowl scraper to scrape down your flour. And I'm gonna let this rest for half an hour. And while this rests, I'm gonna show you what I usually use to mix my dough when I'm making more than just 2 loaves. So often my practice is that I make 6 loaves of sourdough every other week. My family eats as much as we can on that first day, and then we slice up the bread and I put it in the freezer in Ziploc bags that I use over and over and over. We just take slices out from the freezer and put them into the toaster. So when I do make a big batch of dough like that, I don't hand mix that. I use my Famag Spiral Mixer. Let me show you that. This is a Famag Spiral Mixer. If there is one tool in my sourdough arsenal that really saves me time, it is this machine. It is perfectly designed for sourdough, and I'll tell you why in 1 second. But basically, all that we've just done right now, from dissolving the starter in the water to mixing the flour using that dough whisk, these are processes that I don't really do anymore because I have this mixer. We haven't purchased bread since 2020. I make all the bread that my family eats. And when you have that kind of practice, you need a mixer. And this is really the best sourdough mixer on the market. It is designed to mimic your hand. It is gentle on the dough, but really effective and efficient at building strength. How does it do it? So instead of a paddle, it has a spiral arm. And in addition to this spinning spiral, the bowl itself turns. You have a lot of control when it comes to speed. So it can be just a gentle mixing of the ingredients to really, really working the dough. And it's super easy to clean. So when these spiral mixers were first made, they didn't tilt back like this. They corrected that. And this one, which is the 8S, means that you can detach the bowl, take it out for easy cleaning, clean the arm, easy peasy, put it back in. This is also particularly great for enriched doughs. Those doughs where we're adding butter that we don't want to heat with the heat of our hand, or sticky doughs that are just a real pain, high hydration. This thing makes your life easier every step of the way. Okay, let's get back to our dough. Okay, so while my dough sits and the flour hydrates, I'm going to measure out my salt. So I have a high capacity OXO scale that I love. I've already told you I usually make a huge batch of bread at once. So this is a really neat feature, a pull-out screen. So when I have a big bowl sitting on this scale, I can't see the screen anymore. It sort of blocks my view of the measurement. So I just pull the screen out and voila. So that's why I really love this one. So we're gonna measure out our salt, and I will make a note of every step that I take in another indispensable tool, my bread diary. Now this comes with my course, and it enables you to keep track of every variable. And why that is so great for a sourdough baker is that over time, you will learn things about your dough, about your environment, about your starter that will allow you to tweak things and adapt so that you can achieve the bread that you want to achieve. So I keep a log of all of the bread that I make. Since we're still waiting on the fermentilies, I'll take this time to introduce you to another one of my favorite pieces of equipment. This beauty is my Komo grain mill. Now, super easy to use. Your grain goes into this hopper, you flip a switch, and out comes freshly ground grain. You can use all kinds of different wheat in here. You can do all different types of grain from corn to oats. Why? Why would you want to mill your own grain? Well, this is taking your sourdough to another level. Nutrition-wise, all that whole grain goodness. Flavor-wise, you get to play with all different kinds of heirloom wheats. It is like taking your bread from vanilla to, triple raspberry swirl or whatever it is. You really get to hone in on the flavor profiles that you love. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about starter maintenance. I've been experimenting with a piece of equipment that's new to me. Let me show it to you. This is called the Sourdough Home. It is a temperature-controlled container for your starter. So you can keep your starter out on the counter, but you'll have to feed it every single day. I don't have time for that. The alternative is to keep it in your home refrigerator. However, home refrigerators are really kept at a temperature that's too cold for a sourdough starter to remain in its healthiest state. So the Sourdough Home is your third option. It can go from 41 degrees Fahrenheit all the way up to 122 degrees Fahrenheit. You'll see my starter right now. There are instructions that come with the Sourdough Home that says that if you keep it at 41 degrees Fahrenheit, you can do a feeding schedule of once every 5 days. Everybody's starter is a little bit different. I find that my starter, kept that cold, still seemed sluggish. For my starter, 48 degrees, it gets me about 4 days in between feedings. And what, I don't know if you really can see down here, there are bubbles. There is some activity, evidence of activity and life that I wouldn't see when it's kept so cold in a home refrigerator. What you can also do with this, because it goes up so high in temperature, is that you can play with the speed that a levain matures. So say you want to make a levain, not the night before, but the morning of, but you have maybe a 3 or 4 hour window in which you need that levain to come up to its prime position, to use it in your dough. You put this up to 78 degrees, 79 degrees, you pop your levain in there, and in 3 or 4 hours, it's ready to go. Good night. Okay, so my flour is hydrated. I'm gonna add my salt and water. Now, a thermometer will make you a better sourdough baker. It will help you understand what's going on in the fermentation process. Knowing the temperature of this dough tells me approximately how long it's going to take to bulk ferment. This Thermapen is blindingly fast, super reliable. Right now, it's 73 degrees, which is probably pretty close to the ambient. If I keep this bulk fermenting at 73 degrees on my counter, this is going to take a lot longer than I would like. So I have a piece of equipment I'm going to show you that's going to help this process along. Let's set it up. Okay. This is a proofing box. So this is designed to keep your dough at the perfect ambient temperature that you want it to be at. Look how easy it is to set this thing up. So this super compact Brought and Taylor proofing box, very lightweight, stores really well. This dough will fit in perfectly, just like this, but I do have a container which is the perfect proportions. So if I was making double that amount of dough or more, I can do like 6 loaves in this. This fits perfectly into this proofing box. So this is really handy. I have a link to that. Now, super easy to set up. You put this lid on, your dough is inside, you're plugged in, you set the temperature to what you want it to be. A proofing box is a godsend in the middle of winter. As you can see, I'm surrounded by a lot of metal, I have stone walls. It can get pretty cold in here. This just makes my life a whole lot easier. There is a pan for water that keeps the environment nice and humidified, so I don't even need to keep a lid on my dough. Okay, so this dough has been bulk fermenting for 5 hours, roundabout, and it's ready to be shaped and proofed. So I am going to use my bowl scraper to get it out of the bowl and a bench scraper to cut it and divide it into my 2 loaves. Now, I like the sharper edge of a bench scraper rather than this edge of the plastic to cut my loaves. I find it way more effective. Okay, so I'm going to let these doughs rest and realign since I split them apart from one dough, and I'll show you the next piece of equipment. Proofing baskets. Now, in my course, I do show you how to use a regular bowl as your proofing basket. But if this is going to be a regular practice for you, sourdough, then there's nothing better than a proofing basket. And I find that the easiest shape to make is what's called a batard. It's an oval shape of dough. I find that it is easier to get a tight shape from this one than, say, a round bowl. So I recommend, especially if you're a beginner and want to invest in a basket, get a shape like this. This is a 10-inch. I make kind of large loaves. So we're working with 1,000 grams of flour split into two, 500 grams of flour in each dough, and I find a 10-inch is right for me. Now, I have seasoned these. These have been with me for many years, and these liners are well seasoned. So I take a bit of flour each time I do it, and I do a light dusting. Not much, guys, because every time I finish using these baskets, once my oven has come down and isn't at the baking temperature, once it has cooled a bit, but there's still residual warmth, I put my baskets into the oven and it takes out all that moisture so I don't get sort of moldy liners, and that flour kind of sets into almost like a hard crust. So that's my method, and now I only have to do a light dusting before putting these loaves in. I do also like to put sesame seeds over my loaves. My family loves the taste of that kind of toasted sesame. So that also helps the dough come out and away from the liner. I'll shape these, I'll put them in the basket, and I'll show you how we're gonna cap them. So I let these doughs rest for about 10 minutes, and then I come in and do a tighter stitch. And then I'm going to put them into my refrigerator for an overnight cold proof. Now, a lot of people will put a damp towel over their bread, but I do find that a towel will dry the bread out a bit. So I do recommend these. It's like a shower cap, but it's actually called a food cover. Now, I don't love plastic. I try to avoid plastic as much as I can. However, these are reusable. I have not bought another set. These are the original. It keeps the right amount of moisture, I find. Now, in the morning, when these are ready to go into the oven, I am going to score them with my lamb. This is a piece of equipment that I recommend to all of my sourdough students. Yes, you could use a knife. I don't recommend that. You're never gonna get the score, the line, the cleanness, the ear that you're looking for unless you invest in a lamb. This is like $5. So it also keeps you safe. Some people use a razor blade, and I find that is, that freaks me out a bit. I want a handle, good sturdy handle. This one is a curved blade. There are also lambs that are straight. I like to do a nice kind of curved 45-degree angle down the top of my loaves. So a lamb is my next recommendation. Okay, so we're going to proof these babies overnight, and then we're going to talk baking equipment. Okay, I have baked my loaves. Let's talk baking equipment. So when I first started making sourdough, I baked in a Dutch oven. One of the benefits of that is you have a lid that traps in steam very effectively. One of the negatives is that you are limited in size and shape of your loaf. So let me introduce you to two fantastic alternatives. The first one is this, the Challenger bread pan. It is made of cast iron, just like your Dutch oven, and it makes a gorgeous loaf, as you can see. And just like a cast iron pan, it is heavy. So I recommend this to people who have the strength to take cast iron in and out of the oven. Now, the recommendation for the Challenger pan is that you heat this up for an hour, and then you add your loaf directly to the pan. The first time that I used it, I thought that the bottom of the bread was a bit too dark. It was darker than I like it. So I experimented, and I found that just heating it up for about 40 minutes and then putting your bread on a piece of parchment paper, baking it right in, cover it up, perfect. As you can see, this one I baked in the Challenger pan and it's beautiful. This is an heirloom piece. This is something that you pass down from generation to generation. As you can see, it has none of the enamel on it that degrades and gets nasty on a Dutch oven. This stays beautiful. If you want a more lightweight alternative, then I think this Brought & Taylor baking shell is perfect. One of the advantages is that you do not have to preheat this shell. Disadvantage, you need to pair it with a baking steel or a baking stone. As you can see, I have a hand-me-down pizza stone that I got from my mom. I use it with that. Perfect. You heat up the stone and then you add the bread and you pop this baking shell right on, and it does a fantastic job. I saw no difference between baking with either of these devices. This super lightweight doesn't have to be preheated, but it needs a pair with either a baking steel or a stone. The link that I have in the description is a baking steel and the shell as a set. And that is really the same price as a Dutch oven. It's half the price of Challenger bread pan. All right, let's slice these breads up. Let's talk bread knives. This is a Mercer blade that cost me $16. I had this Victorinox. Over $40 I spent on this knife. And I don't know if the camera can show you, but one of the major differences is that the serrating on the Mercer knife is much deeper, which makes this cut like butter. Also, Victorinox is much lighter. The handle on this is not heavy, but it has a nice weight to it, a nice kind of rubber that really stays very grippy in the hand. And proof is in the pudding. A beautiful knife to work with. Now, when you are making 6 loaves of bread like I do, cutting 6 loaves of bread does get very tiring, not to mention cutting even slices. I am not very good at that. So, my solution. That was the suction cup. The Zassenhaus bread slicer. This thing is awesome. It has suction cup feet. You press it down, it doesn't move. It has this really cool guard where you can adjust the width of your bread, and a crank. Now, there is a little bit of a flaw where sometimes when you're pushing your bread through, the slice falls in and catches the handle. With much practice, I realized that you can generally overcome this by just sending the bread with real momentum through the blade. See, even down the very center of the loaf, no problem. Perfectly even slices. Let's get some butter on these. Remember, you can sign up for my sourdough course. I'll put a link below. You can read all my 5-star reviews. You can even get a free trial. So good.